here is that at a Board of Trustees meeting a couple of months ago, we were talking about licensing a marijuana lounge. And we started talking back and forth about what that might mean. Were there any special concerns around a marijuana lounge? Were there possibilities that people would be leaving the marijuana lounge too stoned to drive safely? This sort of thing. And we decided we really needed to put a moratorium on licensing marijuana distribution establishments until we had a better feel for what the risks might be. And so I did a little bit of research, largely for my own help. I'm sure that most of you know what you saw in my little talking points document. But we hoped to bring together people from various backgrounds who would be able to help us to better understand these issues. What we're trying to do is answer two questions. Number one, should we limit the number of marijuana distribution establishments within Nederland, and to what should we limit that? And number two, should we add additional wording to town code in order to supplement the currently established law for the state of Colorado or the county of Boulder? So that is my introduction regarding what it is we're trying to do here. Hold on while I'm afraid I am also having some computer difficulties. Nonetheless, in order to get this started, I'm wondering if we could go to each of you, and just so that we all know each other, have you let us know what your area of expertise is, why you and what you may find interesting about what we're going to be discussing, and what kind of input you might be able to provide. Just let us know your name. We can see your name on the screens. That's what the odd thing about this. We already know each other's names. But kind of what's your background, your area of expertise? So I'm going to start with David Mitchell. Is that how you pronounce your name, David?
It's not. It's David Michael.
David Michael. Thank you very much. David, please let us know a little about you.
So I am general counsel with Agati, and we've had a store in Netherlands since March of 18. But we've got a number of stores around the state, and we're vertically integrated. I'm one of the founders of the company. Prior to that, I've been in the marijuana space as an attorney since 2009. I've definitely watched and had a part in the evolution of the rules, both at where I live in Grand County as well as in state. I think this is great that you guys are calling this together and bringing in the shareholders and stakeholders to figure out what works best in terms of how we go forward, both as companies and the local government together.
Thank you, David. Lindsay Aronson.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Aronson. I am the Director of Licensing and Compliance for Silver Stem Fine Cannabis. Our store in Nederland is just one of 7 of our stores around Colorado, but we've been doing business in Nederland since 2017. Before this, I worked for Simplifio, which is a cannabis compliance software company. And before that, in 2017, I graduated from the University of Denver School of Law. I am not a lawyer. I just got a master's in legal studies, but I went there because at the time they had the only cannabis law class in the world. So I was very excited to be able to take that. So as far as my area of expertise goes, it's mainly just the Colorado laws and Colorado rules. I have been following the hospitality rules pretty closely, as well as what other jurisdictions here are talking about doing, such as Denver. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really excited to participate.
Thank you. Ben Goldsmith.
Hi, Ben here. I work with Teens Inc., organization in Nederland that works with young folks, empowering them to make healthy choices. I also am a mobilizer for a community coalition called Communities That Care, and it's a local coalition working to promote positive youth development in Nederland and the broader Nederland area, peak to peak.
Thank you, Ben. Maxwell Pollitt, or Pole, how do you pronounce the last name?
Pollitt, you had it there.
Pollitt. Max.
Yeah, I'm the CEO of the Flower Collective. We've been in Nederland since 2014. Surprised y'all have so much time to do other things. I don't know how you do it. The Flower Collective takes all of my time every day. It's been a ride. You know, we first came to Nederland as a wholesale cultivator. That was our entry into the industry. And, you know, since then, a lot of things have happened. The wholesale price dropped and we had to sort of figure out how to survive. Since then, we've created a few trademark products that we sell in the industry in Colorado. We're currently looking to expand to other states. We have a large cultivation that we're building out in DeBeck, Colorado right now that will be open around mid-time next year. We do anticipate our intentions are to stay in Nederland for our infused products license, where we create and sell our products from. You know, my area of expertise, I guess, would be just compliance and keeping up with the regulations, making sure that everything we do is, you know, moving in the right direction so that as these major shifts come to the industry, we're ready to take them on. You know, a lot of things have gotten a lot better and more organized now, so it's been a lot easier. But I'm sure everybody here that owns a cannabis business understands that back in 2014, when the state would change things like labeling rules, we all had tens of thousands of dollars of packaging that just went to waste, essentially. So that's really how I started getting into what I do now, is sort of looking at the problems that we were facing like that and figuring out ways to avoid being in that situation.
Thank you very much. Marshall Johns. You're muted.
And Larry, I think you have to press like *6 to unmute yourself. There we go.
Better?
Excellent. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what's up with that. But anyway, so Larry Johns, Town Marshal, Nederland Police. I'm coming from the perspective of general public safety, and I could maybe add in some historical perspective.
Thank you. Allison Bailey.
Hey everyone, my name is Allison Bailey. I work for Boulder County Public Health. I am the Substance Abuse Prevention Program Manager. So coming to this from the lens of working with our community partners through coalitions, and also that public health lens around substance.
Thank you very much. Stacy Johnson.
How you doing, guys? Everybody, I've been well, until 2 years ago, I was a resident of Nederland, from going back to '97. I have I've been participating in the cannabis market, regulated and unregulated, for 30 years. I got my was one of the first shops opening operating in Nederland in 2009, 2010. Withdrew my application with the state and closed in 2011. Held on to my property. Reopened 5 or 6 years ago as a recreational shop. I sat on the 2 prior town task force on medical and recreational cannabis. I have general cannabis knowledge to offer, cannabis business knowledge to offer, and been a longtime member of the community. I currently live in Crested Butte and am in the process of opening my second store down here, and should have a new cultivation facility in Gunnison County coming online about 11 months from now. And I'm here to, both represent the industry, but as well as that longtime resident.
Thank you very much. So I'm sure everyone has seen the discussion document, and that was just my initial cut at what I thought might be interesting and useful for us to review. Undoubtedly, I am missing things. And so I would like to open the floor to anyone who would like to speak. Well, in fact, I'll go through the list because it's hard to do that with WebEx. But I'd like to call on each of you and ask what I am missing from that document, what's there and is superfluous in that document, what's stated but is inaccurate or incomplete in that document. I'd like to begin with a critique of the discussion document so that we can make it more useful and effective. So I'd like to start. I certainly know, because I've seen the email from you, David Michael, that there are a few things missing. And so I wonder if you could discuss what might be missing or superfluous in the document. So I'm going to call upon you, David Michael, first.
And really quick, before David starts, I just a little housekeeping. It's helpful, especially if you're on the phone, just to mute yourself, just so there's not a lot of feedback.
How do I mute myself?
If I mute for you, Stacy, you'll then have to press *6. But you should be able to just mute your own phone. Are you on a cell phone or a landline?
I'm on a cell phone.
You should, if you just mute your cell phone and then just unmute yourself, there won't be feedback.
Okay, cool.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
So, David Michael, are you present, or are you? If you're present, I'd appreciate it if you could unmute yourself and make some comments.
My bad. I forgot that I was muted.
Not a problem. Please
I thought
proceed.
I was actually speaking before, so apparently I was monologuing to myself. But first of all, I thought this was very well put together. I was very pleased at the work that was put in leading up to this meeting, because it gives us a great starting point to discuss this. The one area is that come January 1st, for this year, medical marijuana delivery has been authorized and legal. The only place that I'm aware that that's actually occurring at this juncture, and I might be wrong, is in the city of Boulder. As of January 2nd, the state will begin accepting applications for delivery permits, which is not a new license, but an add-on to an existing retail marijuana store license in terms of a permit. And I do believe that it is probably the most crucial matter that ought to be discussed, in part because even if the town of Nederland determines that it doesn't want to do anything, it doesn't want to authorize the existing stores to engage in delivery, that won't stop businesses outside of Nederland from conducting delivery within Nederland, unless Nederland has an affirmative ban on all delivery. So some sort of ordinance should be discussed in advance of the beginning of the year to determine whether the town wants other businesses to be able to come in, conduct that activity and compete with the existing businesses in their brick and mortar locations. We have our position as to delivery is neutral. I'm not necessarily advocating for it or against it, but I do believe that we ought to not allow. If you're not going to allow the stores to engage in delivery within the jurisdiction, we certainly should not have delivery coming in from outside the jurisdiction. And I would oppose outside delivery anyway. And then if we're going to allow delivery, the state has got a set of first legislation was passed that discusses the local versus the state ordinances. And if you are going to allow for delivery, the state has developed regulations regarding how that conduct should be and how we can engage in that conduct lawfully. In terms of that, the town can certainly be more restrictive than what the state already allows. And there are different discussion points that I think are germane. So I do think delivery should be on our agenda and should be part of this. The other issue that I did not raise in my email that I think we ought to discuss, not that it's something that's pertinent for Agati right now, or I believe for any of the other businesses, but we've seen with recently the Green Solution, or TGS, was bought by a publicly held company. It created a lot of problems because the local jurisdictions guidelines didn't account for a publicly held company having an ownership in a license in those jurisdictions. And so fingerprinting requirements and some of the issues dealing with ownership when it comes to somebody who's buying a stock rather than really actively engaged in the business is something I think that it would make sense for Netherlands to look at now, before it actually has a situation where a company is coming in and buying us or Silverstem or any of the other dispensaries, where now we're looking at figuring out whether that's something that can work or not. Those are the two issues that I believe are outstanding at the moment.
Thank you very much, David. Lindsay Aronson, any thoughts?
So my thoughts just initially when I was reading this document were I wasn't sure if we had already differentiated between the 3 different types of hospitality businesses allowed. So I think we need to discuss if we would allow all 3 in town if we are going to allow hospitality businesses, because there's one kind where it's a brick and mortar, bring your own cannabis type hospitality business. There's a second kind where you can have a mobile licensed premises, like the party buses. And then there's a third type where you can actually sell on the licensed premises and have people consume there as well. You are only allowed to sell a very small quantity, so that was just my first initial thought. And then secondly, I did see something about a question if on the party buses you could mix cannabis and alcohol, and I did just want to point out that that is explicitly banned in the state rules right now.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much.
And same with tobacco. You cannot consume with tobacco as well.
Oh, yeah. I find that kind of interesting, but very fine. Thank you. Ben Goldsmith.
Oh, and just to add on to something that David had said, sorry, Boulder is allowing delivery as well as Superior now too. And I know Longmont is also considering it, but they haven't decided yet.
All right. Ben.
That last one on the types of hospitality was all I really had to add. And then maybe just a point of clarification. Coming into this, the 2 questions, one was whether there would be a limit on dispensaries, on establishments, and how, and if so, what would that limit be? And then the special restrictions question, right? That's only regarding lounges. So question 1 would only be dispensaries, and question 2 is only lounges, just to make sure I'm on the same page as everyone.
I don't think I had thought about those 2 questions in the way that you're describing them, but I believe, yes, what you've just said is correct. The special rules, if we needed them, were primarily around lounges because that was where the BOT was primarily missing enough information to think that through. So yes, as to the, and again, as to question 1, whether we are going to limit establishments, I think we're very much open to not only what that number will be, but whether or not we have a certain number of lounges we allow and a certain number of regular distribution types we allow. I think we're very much open to how we want to word that restriction if we decide that such a restriction is appropriate.
Got it. Thank you. That answers my question fully. Appreciate
And
it.
then this is Miranda. I just want to jump in. So the Board of Trustees does definitely want us to tackle the limitation on the number of marijuana establishments, just because the moratorium that's currently in place will expire on January 19th. And there were previously applications that have come forward for new retail establishments. So that's why their ask has been that we tackle that first, since there is a timeliness component behind the expiration of that moratorium.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Miranda. Thank you for reminding me to remind everyone here that there is kind of a priority. We would like to tackle, we would like to have a conclusion to question number 1 first, and then we can more at our leisure review question number 2. So thank you very much, Ben. Maxwell.
All right. This was really well thought through. I thought you did a very good job coming up with exposing the potential liabilities of this. Couple notes I have here. I would tend to agree with what's his name, David, about the delivery. If there was a moratorium on the delivery licenses, given approval for local businesses in town, that would allow other licenses within the state to deliver in Nederland. And I think that would be, we'd be remiss for not taking a look at that and, really making sure we got that one right. Also, the publicly traded companies comment that was made. Now you can own stock of a company without having to go through the ownership process of the company. It would essentially eliminate, the fingerprinting and all the work it takes to either renew or apply for a new license in Nederland, which obviously, stockholders around the country or even just the state wouldn't really be able to do. And then reiterating the fact that having alcohol and tobacco on any marijuana license premise for sale or just to be given out wouldn't be allowed. So that really can be eliminated from all this. Now, I did hear you say that we wanted to answer question number 1. That was the priority here. What exactly is question number 1? Is it operating vehicles or equipment while intoxicated, or what?
No.
Should there be a limit on number of retail?
Correct.
Okay. I could talk all day about what I think about it. I think that maybe you all should lay it out what the town thinks, and we can sort of give feedback on, the thought process of that. And then other than that, I think between the points that were made before I got to talk and the due diligence you did before this, I think the majority of it is out here now. So
Very good. And what I would like to do, never mind, I will deal with that later. Marshall Johns, any thoughts?
Larry, I'm not sure if you might be muted on your end. You're not on ours.
Marshall Johns, why don't you work through the technical issue there, and I'm going to step forward to Allison Bailey. Any thoughts while we're waiting on Marshall Johns?
Thank you. I think one thought that I have, and I apologize that I have not been as engaged in the ongoing discussions with the Board of Trustees. It's been a busy time at Public Health these days. But I think one question I have is, it seems like the assumption in the document that Nederland has already decided to opt in to marijuana hospitality and that decision has already been made. Is that correct, or is the discussion about opting in?
That decision has not been made,
Okay.
and opting out is something we can consider. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. I agree about the delivery decision. I think that's coming up at the same time as the hospitality, and really is important for folks to consider what the town of Nederland would like to see, and especially what impact that would have on businesses in Nederland if other places decide to have delivery. I think one thing for me that was missing from the document was discussion around smoke-free protections. At the state level, the HB 1230 exempts marijuana hospitality establishments from the Colorado Clean Indoor Air Act. That said, it is our position at Public Health that any exposure to secondhand smoke or vapor is harmful to health. And so protections for workers at the establishment, for patrons, that is an area to explore in terms of if Nederland would like to opt in to having marijuana hospitality establishments, and something that important to have as part of the conversation. That you touched on in the document was around the impact on young people. And I think that's another piece to explore and think about. People are not getting access to marijuana products through dispensaries, but it's more of what does that increasing normalization of marijuana use look like? And I know with Ben's work with Communities That Care, there's some specific data that's available around specific to young people in Nederland. We have at the health department, Boulder County-wide statistics around young people and their use and their perception of risk and things like that. But I think one thing to add as a discussion item was maybe, or something to share with the group, is maybe some of that CTC specific data. And if that's not available, I can certainly share some of the Boulder County data as well and look at those in together.
Wonderful.
Those are the things that came up for me.
Thank you very much. That would be wonderful. And I am not sure how we handle this, so I'm going to ask a quick question of Miranda. Miranda, when one person on this task force sends out an email, is there an email alias for that, or do you simply provide all of us with the list of email addresses?
Yeah, I can provide everyone with the list. You could always just reply
Wonderful.
all to the email I sent out yesterday, but I can send that.
Of course. Very fine. Thank you. So that will be wonderful. Allison, if you could expose all of us to that information that you were just discussing.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Thank you.
So, Stacy, any thoughts?
Looking at the one or the two goals, I'll jump right out here and say that yes, I definitely think there should be a limit of retail marijuana establishment licenses issued within Nederland. I think if you look at the health of the retail businesses in Nederland, if we were to use the analogy of Nederland being a business that provides a place for its businesses to operate similar to a mall would, that there would be limits on the types and numbers of competing businesses that would be offered an opportunity to operate within a mall. You wouldn't have a shopping center with two competing food stores or supermarkets operating. I don't think it makes for a good business, and I'm certain that it would only contribute to a dilution of existing business within Nederland with regard to cannabis if we continue to issue licenses. And, with regard to special restrictions, I don't have any real insight into whatever nuances are happening regulatory-wise for marijuana lounges. But the hospitality licenses, as was brought up, there's 3 different kinds. I think it's important that we, evaluate what's the appropriate thing for our community. I do think that the fact that there is a wine tasting room and all of our other alcohol imbibing establishments and 2 other small breweries, I do believe that it's keeping within the theme or the spirit of the existing businesses to allow for hospitality licenses. I think that should be given a lot of consideration to where those are operating and their impact on the community. With regard to delivery, I think that in general, it's time to grow up in Colorado here, as the state is allowing us, and to allow this to be a product that is normalized, particularly in a period where we have COVID, and that's not going away. Could be a significant public health issue, allowing for that delivery. I would say, after having been involved in the 2 previous task forces set up by the town of Nederland, our rules go back prior to the issuances of any medical marijuana licenses, and it would probably be prudent to maybe give them a once-over and start from the beginning and see how what we're doing relates to the state generally. And a lot of those stuff were written without anybody having any experience operating or regulating cannabis businesses. I was present prior and operating prior to any regulation, so I've seen it change quite a bit. I think we would do well to, address the issue comprehensively all the way down to our applications, and as was brought up earlier in the conversation, the different forms of entities that are now allowed to be licensed. So yeah, that would be the gist of what I would have to say there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm especially impressed by the notion of Nederland as a mall. I had never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely correct. It's small enough that it may as well be a mall. This is why I brought up the possibility of people in the town having marijuana, having ready access to marijuana and alcohol. And whether the marijuana establishment can sell alcohol or not, you could just walk across the street and have alcohol after you'd been at the marijuana lounge. This is an issue we would have to deal with, even though it is not legal for the marijuana lounge to sell alcohol or for our brewery to sell marijuana. So the notion of a mall applies in a number of important ways. Larry, are you back? Are you able to talk to us now?
How's that? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Any thoughts?
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not too sure. Anyway, so I guess let's just start off on the whole delivery thing. That's kind of interesting. One concern I would have would be potentially somebody being their own entrepreneur, so to speak. And selling product on the side, black market style. That could potentially be an issue. As far as the number of stores in town, generally I would be of the mindset that business will sort itself out under some sort of free market. But I also think that potentially the town should really look at what they want to do and what direction they want to take and what they want the town to look like and advertise like. Whether 10 stores can live or sustain themselves here, I don't know. But I think 10 would be too many, and just as an example. As far as like a marijuana bar goes, I would have concerns about people bringing their own marijuana in. And the reason I say that specifically is, how does the town or any governmental entity figure out their tax cut out of that? Or what would that look like? And I don't know the specifics around the last one that we had, how that actually worked. If it was just a general business license and that's all they paid. But I think obviously this whole marijuana industry is surrounded and supported by tax revenue, and the town should definitely look at that angle. As far as people being too high or whatever, I don't think adding any more marijuana stores or lounges is going to make that big of a difference. We don't have a whole ton of issues right now, so I don't see that's going to change significantly. We do get a few people per year that have medical issues of dosing themselves too much, and generally that comes from edibles. So that might be another concern, is at a marijuana consumption bar for people who are traveling from out of state. And that's where it seems to come from. Those who are traveling here, who are here to recreate and try something new or get back to their roots or whatever, the edibles seem to get them. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Trustee Taylor, it looks like we did have two people join us, or maybe someone on the call who just called in. Who called in a little bit ago? Is that maybe Mark or John?
So I see, is the name?
Angelica Sloan, who joined, and she is an associate of mine with Agati, and
Very fine.
clients with us as well. So maybe Angelica, you can introduce yourself real quickly.
Please do.
Yes, so I work with David on the compliance side, and I did just join the call, so I appreciate the introduction. Thank you.
And then there's someone on the phone who I think was trying to talk too. Who else is there?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, this is John Dyett. I'm here also with the Kind Castle.
Hi, John.
How's it going?
So, John, I don't know, we did earn introductions a little bit ago. I don't know if you want to do just a quick introduction about who you are and your interest in the committee, and then Trustee Taylor may have more he'll want you to add.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So, my name is John Dyett. I had worked on the Kind Castle in downtown Netherland here for a little while now, and got the store open, and things are running smooth. We were having discussions about the hospitality establishment component, just overall as the industry, and we were looking to create a facility that where consumers could purchase and either in limited quantities or consume cannabis. So definitely we're open to I think we all need to address these concerns. We all have valid concerns. Everything I've heard is I'm on the same page with, as far as leaving the facility under the influence, just the concern of odor, or the air purification overall. I have a lot of ideas and unique ways I think that it could be done. But any feedback that I can provide, that's why I'm just joining to contribute any thoughts and just be part of the discussion.
Very fine. Thank you. So Before we go much further, I'm wondering if anyone on the task force has some ideas or proposals regarding how this process may run better. There's no need for anyone to, I'm not demanding that anyone provide advice if you don't have any, but I'm wondering if anyone would like to suggest process methodologies that we might use in our deliberations. And I'm not going to call on people individually. I'm going to suggest just unmute and speak up if you would like to make a suggestion.
This is David, and I think it's helpful that rather than having a blend of different discussion topics addressed during one statement, that we really try to confine them to going forward. This was great from an introduction, so no criticism of what's been said thus far, but let's pick a discussion topic and let's stay on that, and then and try and stay focused on getting everybody's thought on one idea before we move on to the next.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Very fine. Hearing nothing. I have an ask then. We've each made specific statements about our discussion document, and I think, David, you're absolutely correct. We should set up our topics very distinctly for the ensuing meetings and then resolve that topic fully before we move on. And I hope to do that. But David, you're the first one upon whom I'm going to pick here. You mentioned several interesting concepts that should be incorporated into our discussion document. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to propose wording to be added into the document that we could all see and discuss.
Certainly. Yeah, I could put together something on delivery. And
wonderful. So you brought up delivery, and that was a very important topic. That is a very important aspect of this, I believe. You also brought up publicly owned marijuana businesses, and I hadn't thought about that at all. And I think it's a very interesting approach. Would you feel comfortable providing discussion wording around that as well? If you don't, there were other people who brought this up, and I might pick on them.
I'm fine to do it. It won't take me very long, and I think the topic is fairly discreet.
Very fine. Thank you very much. So I would request that you send you propose wording and simply send that document to all of us on this team, and I will then incorporate it directly into our discussion document, and we'll be able to delineate where that fits in our topical discussions. I would also like to hit up Lindsay. You were bringing up the 3 different kinds of marijuana lounges and how those were distinct and needed to be identified individually. And I wonder if you could provide proposed wording to add to the document regarding the different types of marijuana lounge establishments and how perhaps they should fit into our considerations and deliberations regarding marijuana distribution outlets.
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to. And I'll also kind of delineate some of the differences between the rules for each type as well.
Very fine. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that. And finally, I'm going to call upon Allison. You were discussing the smoke-free environment rules and how they have an impact on the health of workers within a marijuana lounge, for example. I wonder if you could propose wording to add to the document on that topic.
Happy to.
Thank you very much. Consistent with my goal of not going over 1 hour and having completed our agenda, I'm wondering if now might be the right time to simply ask, does anyone have anything else that they would like to bring up and discuss now that we've heard everyone speak on this topic. And I'm going to go back to calling on each of you individually so that we don't bump into each other too much. So I'm wondering, David, do you have anything you would like to add before we adjourn? You may be on mute.
I believe we'll be having individuals address kind of discussion points for delivery and hospitality, and I'm going to say HB 1090, which was those three bills were all passed at the same time that brought significant changes to our space. What I would say that I don't think has been discussed is that when we talk about limiting the number of dispensaries or other types of businesses within Netherlands, there's only a few methods in which we can do it. And I think that obviously we have an initial discussion as to, whether we want to let this be a free market approach where it's a free for all. We want to look at what is appropriate for the town. In doing so, the ways that I've seen it addressed in the past is either through a moratorium that just stays sort of in perpetuity, which I do not believe is the best way to do it, but does work for a significant amount of time. The other is zoning restrictions, where you create setback or distance requirements between existing stores, not existing stores, but them in future licenses to provide a certain level of buffer. Or marijuana, there's a large approach to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And under Colorado law, with regard to liquor licenses, one of the issues that the town council is supposed to consider when a new liquor license is coming in is whether the needs of the population are currently served by what is already present. And so in doing so, what I would suggest that we discuss is, rather than something that is anti-competitive in nature, in trying to keep out competing businesses, rather keep our discussion into what town council should consider legally. And there may be another form that I'm missing, but whether the moratorium should be continued, whether we should look at zoning limitations, meaning that it can only go in certain zones and can only go with certain setback distance requirements, or the third, which is, are the needs of the current population met by the existing businesses there? And if so, how many should there be no more businesses added underneath that line of thinking? Or if there is, how many other licenses are there room for? Certainly, you can impose a cap or a limitation on the number of licenses that will be given out at any one time, and that would allow for transfer of licenses, or if one of the businesses should go under, a new license that could come up. And all of those are appropriate, but also legal and not anti-competitive. And I think that we should really be thoughtful that we look at the existing methodologies of considering this very important topic and confine ourselves to that, or any other methodologies that I have not listed aside from the three that I have.
Thank you very much. Any additional thoughts, Lindsay?
Yeah, I just had a couple of responses to some points that people brought up previously, and then I just wanted to propose one other new idea as well. Just a couple of options when it comes to odor. I wanted to suggest that we could regulate as a town that any hospitality business has to install carbon filters, because a carbon filtration system is generally recognized as the best and easiest system to install to filter out any marijuana odor. Also, when it came to secondhand smoke, we could just propose only allowing vape, or we could only allow dabbing concentrates. That kind of goes along with the same thoughts about open flames. As a local jurisdiction, you can regulate that no one is allowed to use an open flame, and you could only allow consumption through edibles or an electronic dabbing rig of some sort. Just an idea. Also, in response to the marshal who brought up concern about edibles. I just wanted to point out that for the marijuana and sales and hospitality establishments, there is a limit of 20 milligrams for edibles, which is pretty low, and they have to first only give a customer 10 milligrams, and then they have to see how the customer's doing, and then they're allowed to give them another 10 milligrams. For tourists, I think this is actually a really good rule, because if you are a tourist that comes and visits for the first time and you go to a retail dispensary, you can buy a pack of edibles that has 100 milligrams in it. So if you're in the supervised setting and you're only allowed 20 milligrams, it might actually be better than just having no hospitality establishments, because part of the state rules for hospitality establishments is you have to provide education to the consumers there as well. Along those lines, we could also, as a local jurisdiction, require that any hospitality business requires responsible vendor training for the owners and employees of that business. And one of the things that is required to be covered in responsible vendor training is how to recognize signs of intoxication. So, and that goes for both marijuana and alcohol. That training teaches these employees at cannabis businesses how to recognize that they shouldn't serve someone because they're too intoxicated. And as far as a new idea goes, I did just want to point out that in the state rules, it does allow hospitality businesses to be open from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. So I just wanted to let y'all know, because that is a pretty wide range, that you might want to try to further restrict that. But that is obviously up to the town. Thank you. That's all.
That's very good information. Thank you very much for providing it. Ben, any thoughts?
You know what? Just going back again to when I had clarified the two questions, since this discussion items document is being updated and it's going to guide our future discussion, and because it spends a significant amount of time just on the topic of density, or in Netherlands' case, maybe saturation, I just do want to clarify the framing of the discussion on those items, maybe in writing, that had been asked a couple of things that had been brought up, that the option of opting out of hospitality isn't part of one of those questions. And the other issue being that when you're talking about density and setting, let's say, a cap of on the number, that setting a cap that includes more than one kind of cannabis business is a topic of this discussion, because as it stands, it looks like it's only retail. So if you had, for instance, a cap on 5 retail dispensaries, could you have another 12 lounges? You know what I mean? If that's going to guide our discussion, I'd like it to be clarified, the framing.
Ben, would you like to suggest wording to clarify the framing?
I can take a shot at it, sure. Thank you.
I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Maxwell.
Yeah, I'd like to just end this by saying I think you all have brought together the right people, right? I think everything that's been talked about here is important. Obviously, a lot of this is very sensitive, as it goes for local business health of current businesses and liability of the town and the people that partake in this industry. I don't necessarily have anything extra to add. I mean, I think that we're going to surface a lot of new ideas and issues as we get into each one of these topics. I was going to suggest that we sort of look at not necessarily looking at the cannabis industry as one entity in Netherlands, but recognizing the fact that there are different types of license privileges and that each one of those types of licenses affects different. Like my company, for example, we wholesale only. So the local business in Netherlands, doesn't necessarily affect us as much as it might affect a local store. But I think we all have the same issues, which is finding people to work those positions that our stores require, the jobs that we need to have done. all the points that have been brought up, I think are valid and need to be explored in depth. And I have nothing else to add at this time that hasn't already been said.
Thank you very much. Larry, any thoughts? Any closing thoughts?
Kind of like Max just said, that a lot of this stuff is going to continue to pop up as we're discussing it. And I already heard a few different things that are going to be important to work through as we're going. I do like the idea of let's just tackle one topic at a time, though. Work through that, come to a conclusion, understanding whatever that might look like, and move on to the next one. That's all I got right now.
Thank you. Allison, any last thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Just want to echo Ben's points around the framing of the questions, and also around the number of retail establishments too, sort of getting some clarity around the ideas of having everything be considered one, like a certain cap of 10 for all licenses. Or I think that's something that for folks like myself who are not involved in the industry on day-to-day, it'd be helpful to understand a little bit more about that and about where the town is coming from. And then just another thing a question of mine around membership on the task force. I know a lot of times things like this, it's helpful to have a fixed number of folks to be part of conversations. And so just curious about that, sort of how formal or informal these conversations of this group would be moving forward, if folks are allowed to step in or out, or bring additional folks to the conversation, and how that might look.
I think I'm open. I think we are open to persuasion on that. We have identified a specific team, and the only problem we would have in allowing too much variant on that is that a group of much more, it's very hard to come to conclusions with a huge committee. So we've kind of selected for a particular number, but I think we're certainly open to persuasion if there is a particular area of expertise that could be brought to this by an additional team member. So I'd say don't feel inhibited from bringing forward a suggestion of a new team member, but I think we want to hold it to a fairly small group, just so we can get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense.
I'm glad you brought that up, though. Stacy, last word.
I don't have anything to add at this point.
Very fine, thank you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to
John as well. I don't know if we don't have John weigh in from Kind Castle.
Okay, John.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with everyone's comments on here. I think those are excellent points about limiting the stores. Honestly, just with those fair ways of doing it, with whether it's a moratorium or putting a cap on the amount. And we were proposing the hospitality establishment, which I may have been half the reason why we're discussing this now. But yeah, no, we're certainly here to keep providing feedback as we keep going through the discussions. I heard everyone's points on here, and I think everyone's bringing some solid points to the table. As far as, I will say though that I think that the viewpoint of hospitality establishments post-corona, in contrast with how this was envisioned prior to all of this taking place throughout this year, has changed, at least in my mind. I mean, to envision some kind of a lounge where people are just going to all sit around in some kind of couches or any kind of format that involves, a big open space where everyone's just relaxed around each other, blowing clouds of smoke in each other's faces. I think that those days have passed, and that we are not really thinking that that's even a possibility anymore. And so most of the concerns that I think that we would hear from residents on, that would be at the forefront of their mind, we would naturally be mitigating with how we're kind of thinking these days with Corona, and how we'd want to process the air and keeping people separate. And, so air handling has become exceptionally important after the Corona situation that happened. So we envision more of having private spaces, private small areas where someone could consume more as an area to have that function and privatize as opposed to some big lounge, and I envision more on away from smoke and more vapor or concentrates, and then also not doing edibles, because frankly, I don't think we want to babysit people on edibles, although that, having a little bit, is we can be open to that. But also, I don't think that people want to go and sit in, depending on how nice the facility is, but sit somewhere else and have an edible as opposed to maybe at home. So I don't think that there's a strong, real demand from either side to have an edible consumption taking place from my perspective, just as a dispensary owner. But I think everyone's made great points that I've heard so far, and we're still kind of young into this as far as the discussion. So I'm happy to keep providing any thoughts as we progress.
Thank you very much. So I will cite a member of my wife's family now, because they would say, once you know who to blame, the problem is effectively solved. And John, you've just told us that you're to blame, and just thought I'd let you know that. So what I'm hoping we can have happen for our next meeting is each of you who has an assignment to provide us with proposed wording will submit that proposed wording. I will fold that wording into this document, and I will also try to organize the document into clearly defined topics that I believe we can discuss in a single meeting. And I will welcome your input on that once I have that document finished and sent out to everyone. It'll be revision 2. And our next meeting will focus on one of the topics upon which we have agreed. Does that sound satisfactory to everyone?
Yes.
Yep. Very fine.
Trustee Taylor, I just want to confirm though, because we have to address the limitations within the next 2 months, if that would be likely the first to come.
Oh, certainly. We'll make that the first topic.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, Julian, real quickly,
yes.
I think that clearly the town council has set forth that new licenses is their main issue, right, in terms of getting this done, and we should be respectful of that. The only thing that I think that would be appropriate is right now we could end up with, we don't have an ordinance in place, and an ordinance takes about 3 months by the time, minimum, by the time you put it together, go through a first reading and a second reading, that we don't tackle the issue of delivery and how it would be done until after we have, met the town's needs and the stated desire from town council to have the limitation first. I said number of licenses, or there will be a limitation discussed first. But I would suggest we have a quick discussion about banning outside delivery and address that topic, because if the town council then needs to consider it, and then an ordinance would have to be drafted, which would be relatively simple, but then go through a first reading and then 30 days later a second reading, that if we want to have that in place anytime before February or March, that simple single question has to be addressed. Waiting another month on it pushes us back quite a bit.
Well spoken. Thank you very much. So I would like to adjourn this meeting, and if no one has anything else that they think we need to discuss before we adjourn.
This is Miranda. I'll send kind of a recap, especially the items that kind of have been tasked to different committee members. And I'll also send out a doodle poll for the week of November 9th for you all to pick dates and times that work for you, so we can get the second meeting on the schedule.
I'd like to thank everyone for showing up. I greatly appreciate your time and your expertise, and I believe that we will be able to conclude these meetings with actual meaningful code that will actually benefit Nederland. And so I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you very much, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julian.
Thank you, Miranda.